I got told this is 23 minutes long, so I'm going to talk fast because I thought it was 45 minutes. So I apologize. I'm going to speak fast. Timing, context, and location. One of the big things that we keep talking about in our world, and I'm from the digital side, working on the outside with you on a lot of cases, we talk about the realities of speed in which these things are happening. What I've decided is I went to a museum and I spent some time with some friends walking through different museums, and I started asking them questions because I thought, I'm giving you my opinion on a regular basis, but I should actually get their personal experiences. Whether it be wayfinding, whether it be tagging, whether it be solutions, whether it be security guards, tappings on the shoulder, telling what we can and cannot do. What we realized is that the frustration at the end of the day was very much that it came like a story, like we're breaking up. Like you're actually not interested in having me there. You're not actually interested in having me engage. And when we start talking about the experience outside the walls and the experience inside the walls and why we're doing what we're doing, and then all of a sudden we realize, wait a second, maybe this presentation should come off like I'm breaking up with you. So we're going to have a conversation about me breaking up with you as a museum, why we're not engaged anymore. So you're never in the right place at the right time. You're never there when I need you. Your content is always hidden behind something. I have to work too hard to get to it. You're brutal with long-distance relationships. Once we've talked, you seem to forget what we talked about. There's no extension to that. You're making me work too hard to fulfill me. This is this is very, very difficult for me. Why do you make this so difficult? And then, of course, we're not growing together. It seems that I've grown up and I've moved over here, at least, as the male side of this conversation. I've grown up, obviously, and I'm moving on, but you seem to just not grow with me. You're still dealing with the same internal issues. And so we started talking about, you may have noticed I'm selfish. And what's really important about it is I'm really selfish. It's not just me, it's every single one of us. No, really, I'm selfish. It's about what I want. And we seem to still be working towards the, how come every single one of me is not getting what we want out of this. And what we're doing is welcoming in the long tail of conversation. The long tail of conversations, I'm expecting it to be an iterative relationship, not a one-off engagement, not when I come through the doors. I expect to be continuously having a relationship with you, but not when you want it. Not when you want it. In every other industry we're working in, it's when the client wants it. And I think there's a change that has to happen in mentality about customer service or customer experience. You bore me. Provide me with an outstanding opportunity experience wherever I am. What's happening is we're going through these opportunities where you get me in. I'm excited about the opportunity we're having, this engagement. You're all about wonderful, amazing, niche engagements. And all of a sudden, it stops. So I start building my own engagements with you. I start taking pictures. I start talking. I start talking to others. In fact, I see what others have said about your content, and you're getting a little upset about that because I'm talking to other people when I should be talking to you. This doesn't make sense to me. How come when I'm here, I want to shape my own experience. I want to move through this so that I'm starting to collect all of those pieces of content. Stop feeding me beats. If anybody else got a beat issue, I hate beats. And for some reason you keep, yes, there in the corner, thank you. Cannot stand beats. Well, other discussion over drinks. Culture is not like IKEA. You're not force feeding me through a process, but it feels like that. And unfortunately, the culture's happening everywhere. It's happening outside the walls as well. So the experience is not, I'm walking through the door. I heard earlier a conversation, it's like 1 million people walking through the door and 10 million people coming online. When are we going to wake up to that conversation saying, wait a second, it's not just they're coming online, they're also experiencing all the other networks that are outside of your particular relationship. It's what they're saying about you in all these engagements. So stop force feeding, and I want to take some involvement. And you've heard snippets of this, people bringing others inside the museum and creating experiences together. You're seeing the genesis of that, but you haven't involved me along the way. I've never liked your mom. Just so we're clear, didn't like your mom. But what was important was this harmony and collision situation. What we're constantly trying to do is we don't like a passive engagement. We don't want somebody who walks through the doors and doesn't experience us. We don't want somebody on the outside say something about us. It's like, yeah. We want them to care. We've always wanted them to care about our collection. We want them to care about our opportunities. And those people are now having conversations outside of your realm. And you're dislocating yourself from those conversations so that we're talking about them at dinner parties. We're talking about events that are happening, but you're not taking part in those events. This collision and harmony concept is what the idea was that we put these artworks up, we put these installations in to create an engagement, to create an experience, to create some rapport. And it's okay if it's bad. It's okay if I walk away and said I didn't like it. It's okay if I walked away and said I'm tagging at this exact moment. 20 people talk about how they didn't like it for some reason, and someone will jump in, guaranteed, and involve themselves in the conversation about how much they loved it. That's what these things happen. These momentums happen. We're not building the platforms for these to be taking shape. You said you knew me. Use your sixth sense. Make some assumptions. You know everything about me. I give it to you. So we spent the last 3 years giving you everything. Giving you. Just spent 3 years giving you everything about myself. I walk in the door, I checked in. I walk into an exhibit, I talk about it. I scanned with my phone. We talked earlier in the last session about scanning barcodes and how it was an extra charge to use your phone to buy a ticket. What I don't understand is every other relationship I had is I'm doing my banking, I'm paying for my parking, I'm paying for the parking in your building, I'm walking up and paying, but yet the experience with you is a double charge. Why is that? Where's the experience? Where are you carrying through with a full customer experience? That customer engagement point is all the way through everything we do. And this funny thing is, you don't do anything with that information. The last conversation was talking about going really deep in all the information, but all the web information, all the conversations that are happening that you can take part in, you're not doing anything with. Now, some groups are. It's starting to take shape. But you're not responding to me in any way, and those uniqueness opportunities are, we've seen some really neat things happen where people are taking part in, again, genesis of opportunity. Tagging, putting information in, being involved in locational events, off-site events that are taking place that have to do with your cultural institutions. But for some reason, you're not doing enough with that personal information. You wanted what for Christmas? Really? How much information do you actually know about me? How much you've actually taken the time to stop and realize the people that are your loudest, this concept of Maven and connectors, the concept, if you've heard about it, it's a Glidewell concept where you actually have people who are the loudest speakers are going to go out and start talking about something, they're going to get involved, they're going to take ownership of that content, and they're going to be out there speaking on a regular basis. Someone's a car collector, or someone's a specific art collector, or someone who's fanatical about stamps. Any of these things, the people are out there dying to get their hands on your content. And then there are people out there in the connection space who are dying to circulate the content that these people have. And this is the contextual layer that we see is changing so much about you. The context is, how do we find out enough information about you, not bringing you information, not putting a name on you, but actually figuring out the contextual way that you're working. Typical systems now outside your walls work this way. Every other major institution that's starting to deal with content is starting to deal with this problem, has been dealing with this problem. Some of them have changed and shifted their entire algorithms or the way that people purchase their product, engaged with it, based on these moving issues. So, really, how come you don't know enough about me? I don't need a survey. I know we're not compatible. My future is not mobile, it's context. And what I mean by that is contextual wearable content. I wear a Fitbit. I tag in information all the time. I'm constantly tracking everything I do. There is, by the time 2015 rolls around, IBM predicts there's going to be about 6 billion connected devices, wearable connectable devices, that will give us geolocational points on everybody that is outside our walls. Not about what painting they're standing in front of, not about what artifact they're doing, what they're standing there, because that's the tagging part. They're actually checking in and organizing themselves against it. But what really we're seeing is they're going to have information about how we move, what our patterns are. Based on those patterns, we can put up geofencing. We can start doing things that are about the social behaviors, and I can change how I interact with you. Dramatic changes in that shift are going to be huge for us. So what's with all the oversharing? It's interesting. The audience shifted. The audience has an online profile, and the people who say they don't have a very little online profile or reducing back. They're very, very few and far between. What people are doing is they're changing who they are online. They're doing things that they would say, okay, this is my persona, this is a picture of me, this is the Facebook picture or whatever it is they're doing. But in the social engagement now, what we're starting to track is every single engagement that they're doing is actually building a persona and a profile on themselves. And so they are actually who they are. People are actually changing what music they listen to because of the open source. People are changing how they perceive things. But their exploration is bigger than ever because they're starting to create a vocabulary around art, around music, around messaging. What they're starting to do is by tagging in this information, we're creating not only groups of people who are like-minded that are getting together and engaging, which you could take part in, but by putting this point down, what they're doing is they're saying, this is who I am, this is the information you have about me. What are you going to do to change to give me more context? I'm sure someone's out there that's right for you. I keep telling you, I'm breaking up with you. It's done. We're out of this thing. It's not you, it's me, I've changed. I gave you my time, I gave you my context, so I gave you all my time. Anytime I enter into an engagement with you or a conversation, it's something you should consider special. In other businesses, we look at it saying, wait a second, how much time have I given you? Based on that time, do I expect that I'm important to you all the time? No. You are not important to me until I say you're important to me. You're important to me based on when I'm going to show up at an event. You're important to me when I'm standing there. You're important to me when I'm standing in front of an art piece or standing in a cultural environment or a situation, a dance event. Something that's happening, you are now important to me. This push concept where we just keep pushing general content out and engaging is not contextual to me. You're not thinking about that engagement point. And so I gave you my time, I gave you my context, and more importantly, I gave you my location. You actually know more about me. And it's interesting, we don't change the content. If someone's standing in your environment, standing outside your environment, standing 150 feet away from your environment, standing 2 miles away from your environment, and standing across the world, we don't change the experience at all. It's a one-size-fits all. And that's totally unacceptable because the experience is meant to be about me and the relationship I'm having with you. Every other digital engagement we create is, I'm standing here, what's near me, what am I doing? How do you bring some context to me with what I've given you? And we're not doing that. We're not doing enough of that. And you have so much information that people want. You've got so much information that these mavens want to get their hands on. They want to engage in your collection, the stuff that's sitting in your basement that we can't get access to. They want to see that. We heard it over, they were talking about the ROM in the other room about how there was a canoe in the basement and they couldn't get access to take a picture of it. So they had to close the museum down at night and they came in and took a photo of it. I'm like, how hard is it to get this access? But that's what they want. That's what we're trying to give them access to. So we need to figure out a way to move together. Timing. So if I give you some, don't waste it because everybody's battling for the same amount of time. It's 24 hours a day, that's it. And so if someone's giving you an ounce of time, it's about making that experience extremely valuable to them at the time in which they give you. You've got to personalize in some way. And that doesn't have to be, I know your name, I know your dog's name, I know your family's name. You don't need to go that level. It's about what the experiences are we've created and what experiences we had in the past. It's very easy to do with digital engagement now. So don't waste the time you have when you get it. Location, it matters, pay attention. Locational base, Google gives you all this information. Where did people come from? How long did they stay? What was the point of entry? All of that mapped. Visualization is becoming one of the very big topics that we work with around culture. The idea of location, we just worked with the Canada Council of Arts to visualize every piece of dance data in Canada. So where is a dance show happening? What's happening? Who's the event? You can click and see. And what they did is we actually put an open call out to the actual dance companies and said, you tell us what you want to distribute. You are the largest megaphone that an artist could have, a collection could have, and you are that megaphone. They'll give you the information because they're the lowest common denominator. They're the people who are in the actual location. They're looking for a way to distribute and get access to you. This is a really big change of events for when you start seeing that we're visualizing right across a country all these points of interest, and those points of interest are being supplied by an outside source that we actually are taking advantage of using and helping them get the visualization they want. Context. Me, we, and everyone. The concept is it starts with me. I want to know where I am. I want to know who knows me. I want to know how connected I am, and most of the time I give you that information. As soon as I engage into another piece of content with you, then I'm engaged with someone else. It doesn't have to be you. Someone within your network, if I've engaged, then it becomes a we very quickly. The 1990 rule is this essence of how engagement and content gets created. Someone starts a thread, 1% of all that content or 100% of that content that's created is 1% of the people. 9% of it is recycling and commenting and engaging and pushing. And then 90% of people take advantage of that long tail engagement. Thinking about that is we start having context for a lot more of traction, understanding where people are coming from and how they're engaging with our specific content. Do you still respect me? I think I may have told you way too much about myself over time. What's that sign of? No, never mind. I'll skip it. We gave a privacy first thing, and so this whole idea of our privacy relationships, I know we're struggling with what the rights are around the material that we own and we have. We've got to figure out a way to break down some of those engagements because the privacy element, it's not about who we know, their name, their specific address. What we're looking for is their patterns and algorithms and engagements. Other facilities are doing this with the basic content that you currently have today. So the thing is, it's not about being ethical, it's about understanding how we engage with those users and what level of engagement we can and how much tracking we do. A lot of it's about building on-the-fly algorithms to build in those relationships. It's not that difficult. The systems are out there in place now. So we have to start contextualizing. I feel like I'm talking to a robot. It's a one-sided conversation. Maybe next time you can do your part. Yes, you're micro-engaging. Yes, you're finding one or two. Yes, you've ever go into an institution where someone says, thanks for coming. Awesome. Thanks for your help. That was great. Thanks for coming. Okay, that's good, but what more? Hey, I noticed you're looking at. Hey, you posted an image of. Hey, you were involved with. And there are digital algorithms to actually facilitate this. We don't need it to be an individual that does it. It can actually come up with a way that it's not so robotic, but it actually starts to pull together context within the collection that you actually don't know about. These tracks are huge. The data is huge. The visualization is huge. So what's next? I want my Klimt poster back and then my LPs. Anybody? Okay, never mind. Ubiquitous passive computing. So the essence is what I talked about, everybody's wearing technology, you're already wearing it. Most of you have devices, probably 2 or 3 in your pocket. Ubiquitous computing is the concept where you're starting to add algorithm or information into one, and we're getting more information out of it because I put a response in, it gave me a response back, and I build on that over time. You've already got that. Your cars are going to have it. Your phones are going to have it. Your bags are going to have it. Your clothes are going to have it. Wearable technology is coming very fast. What that's going to do is you got to start thinking about how it's not you have to think about it. It's actually the way it's going to change your algorithm, and it's going to lead you to new experiences that you didn't have before. But ubiquitous computing and passive computing are going to be really, really interesting for us in the future, and we got to start thinking about it. Cultural mapping and visualization is huge. You think about it right now. You already have this information. And the key is to understand how to expose some of that content back to the community, to understand where the conversations are happening, and start thinking about how to use that mapping to understand what kind of content those individuals want. They don't want to know about the show that's happening today in the city unless there's a value in understanding it for some other reason. How you actually broadcast this whole relationship is going to change. Open data. We do tons of work with open data. I know you had conversations yesterday, some people may have been in the room or not, but open data is this experience where there is an army of people who are dying to get your content, who are building apps, or have already built apps, city apps, engagement apps, cultural apps, specific apps under one particular style of art, under one specific collection. They want access to your content to become part of their fiber mesh. And this whole cultural mesh that they're building is actually real and happening now. We're working on a project with cities to actually open up not only the transit data, but also the cultural data to show how cultural shifts through a city and how it can be experienced so that you can understand where things are happening, when things are happening. It's a big change that's coming, and that will lead to that visualization. Pop-up and mobile museums. In China, they just released a mobile museum that's got 3D digitalization where it's got screens that are what they call is good enough. They actually pick up the museum and move it because they can't move the artifacts. It's digitization, and it's also showing 3D artifacts. They've got digital printers for printing out the pieces and actually being able to hold them and put them back together. You're getting to experience art in a whole different way. The canvas printing has become huge. The idea of printing off artifacts. I've got a friend who owns a canvas printing company, and he's printing off artifacts that are mashups, and he's got a question about copyright, constantly thinking about how people are experiencing this. But he said that people are actually printing off artworks off the web and printing them and looking at them so they can have a copy for themselves, but they want it on canvas, they don't want it on paper. Is that bad? It's just their Klimt poster, they just want to have it. So 3D display rooms, projection rooms, 100-inch, these classrooms. Every classroom in Northern Ontario has a 100-inch touchscreen, which is actually meant perfectly for your type of content. And they've got no content because they can't get access to it. So we're seeing Kickstarter, we're seeing young artists getting off the ground and actually using these systems to get themselves known. And so what you're dealing with right now with copyright will be a bigger issue in about 12 years when you start seeing some of the artists that you're currently collecting and moving into these spaces who have used these tools to get themselves known, renowned, videos, content, context, photos of them doing the artwork, all of that elements that we're hoping to build for some of the classic collections we have, it's already happening. So how do you take advantage of that, and how do you start collecting that content to make sure that it's not only the curatorial element, but above and around that, that content is going to be geolocationally tagged. It's going to be anything that's a photo, a video, a piece of text that's written, a tweet, a push, anything that's built now will be geotagged. It'll be contextual, it'll be layered by time, and it'll be location-based. So the question is, we're looking at what's coming. How do we do that to what's here now? Because there's a lot of opportunity for that. A lot of the information that we've had out there in the past years is we look at the curatorial data. I spent a month in France this year, lucky for me, but everywhere we went, they talked about where an artist was from. They talked about what influenced the artist. They talked about the geolocational tags that were important. So some of the artwork that's in the National Gallery of Canada was actually being talked about in France, yet there was no geotag as to where the location, where the piece was taken. I stood where Starry Night was actually painted from, and there's no geotag for that. There was geotags on Google Maps about the content, and it was pointing to people who had stolen pictures of the artwork and matched them together. The meshing is already happening. It's happening to us. The question is, how do we get involved? So new business models are needed. So the museum technology has changed. I know that's what the conference is about. I'm watching my time very carefully. What I felt when we started talking about this with the people I was walking through that I was breaking up with the museum with, the technology at the time was the building. For hundreds of years, the building has been what the technology has put ourselves in. The technology is now the cultural fiber. What we're seeing is the fiber of these layers it's not the building itself, but it's the pieces around it. It's the pieces that make up the experience. And those experiences are not pre, during, and post anymore. It's a ubiquitous experience based on these three factors. But we fit in, and we need to grow and change. We definitely fit in. We are huge, huge, huge value to this network. The problem is we're putting up a distance between ourselves and the content. Questions? 2144. Look at that. Bam!
Bonjour, my name is Alain Massé. I'm a founder of IDClick. IDClick is working on digital museum experiences for 18 years now, so we have been in that field for a long time now. So I'm going to give you that presentation to give you, what is possible to do right now, so following our experiences. And I'm sorry for my English, because I'm speaking English. I'm speaking French in English right now, I guess. But I'm sure you will understand me. So, I'm going to introduce you about that integrated vision. But vision, I think it's there. It's possible to do that, but the museums are not yet using all those opportunities. They didn't put all of those things together. So what we have: content, collection and archive, research, interpretation, education and outreach. So we have content tools, catalogs, visualization tools, social media, public contribution mechanism, statistics, search engine, exhibit, games and lesson plan templates, CRM, client relation management, collaborative space, and our audiences, tourism, school groups, families and citizen, research and enthusiasm, content producer, partner and collaborator and administrator. So platform in situ, so I'm talking about inside the museums, but also today in situ can be called the relation between the outside and the inside of the museum, the web, and the apps. So I'm going to give you an idea of what I'm talking about with examples that we work on. Some example have been done a few years ago already, but it's still good examples of what had been achieved in some museums in Canada and abroad. But digital collection, so one side content, collection and archive, tools, catalogs. So most museums have an inventory of their collections or archive in some form of database, but are those databases connected to a communication tools? That's not necessarily the case. Should museums as dedicated database for digital collections and archives? And you have also all that question of interoperability between all those different databases, depending which department started to develop a collection database. So that's quite a well-known project. I think the McCord Museum worked quite a lot on that. They started to try, I would say, 12 years ago to have an integrated vision of the use of those collections, those digital collections. So the McCord Museum, located in Montreal, quickly understood how important their collections are for their outreach and educational strategy. Every web resources is connected to the digital collection. So they really build, they build step by step, year after years. They build something really sustainable, because that project started, as I said, 11 years ago. So, and it's all what they developed still accessible, still up to date, still a model, I would say. Alors, the Louvre digital collection, so they ask us to they had problem with those different databases, and so the Louvre chose to create separate digital catalogs for these three collections, where multiple partners were involved. Digital collection here is, I just presented a very huge museum, but now it's a small museum in Montreal. It's an interpretation center, the Armand Frappier Interpretation Center. It's a scientific center. It's another example of an organization adopting an integrated solution for its collection and digital educational resources. Here, another example. So I didn't say that, but we worked during those 18 years with, I would say, around 80 different institutions, museums, library and archive, university. So that's some government also, like Heritage Canada. Alors, the Center de recherche en civilisation canadienne-française, sorry for that, took database-driven virtual exhibition and transform it into a digital archive manager. So visualization tool, that's another aspect I would like to talk about. There is a different way of using that word, I would say, but we are really in the dissemination now. As you can see, it's really dissemination of knowledge, dissemination of the collection. So you have the catalog, so those visualization, and also a search engine. So many museums today provide access to their collection database online. That's not today quite a reality. But does the collection database system provide engaging and audience-specific visualization tools? That's not necessarily the case. Here is an example developed by the Musée de la Civilisation in Quebec City. Here showcased a collection using a 360 view of the area of Place Royale, geolocated and associated with related media and subject matter. So it's really a multimedia, cyber or visual exhibit here. And also you can use it with your smart phone also. Another visualization tool here, once again, the McCord Museum is a great example of how interactive viewing tool can be connected to the digital collection. These include zooming, 360-degree annotation, comments, tagging, add to cart feature, make your own museum too. They can also be skinned, for other specific project. There is another visualization tool. As I said, it had been done 12 years ago already. Virtual exhibition is still an innovative example of highly engaging, interactive, and meaningful visualization tool, all connected to the central digital collection database. So also they have integrated game find the error. So there is two pictures by two different photographers. In between there is 100 years in those two pictures. And so you can see the evolution or buildings, the changes all over the place. And also they added sound, for that moment. So they have different sound depending when the picture had been taken. Sorry for the English again. So visualization tool, this example from the Canadian War Museum uses Zoomify to optimize viewing of the images and the database and enhance user experiences. That's the visualization tools helps quite a lot to maximize the virtual experience, the cyber experience, I would say here. Exhibition, games, and lesson plan. So content one side, interpretation, education, and outreach, and the tools, exhibit, cyber exhibit I'm talking about. It can be exhibit with interactive kiosk, games, and lesson plan template. So I mean, it's all those elements make a project complete, efficient. So virtual exhibition today have become very common and popular. Many virtual exhibition projects are even larger in scope than cataloging system. And we developed recently a project with Musée de la Civilisation. Again, it was about manger ensemble, so eat together. So it's a portrait of how Quebecers are eating today. So it's about alimentation, how we eat, etc. So it was the idea was to create a virtual exhibition and develop research. And so it's first a virtual exhibition, and then they plan to do a real exhibition eventually from all that research. Okay, alors, how come interpretative materials have not made their way into specific systematic, structured digital database? Exhibition, we're still in that section. This digital archive project includes historical, linguistic interpretation and transcription as part of the actual digital database. So it's really integrated. Another example, much like visualization, tools and virtual exhibition can be connected to the digital collection database. So can games. This example has been reused with various collections. Here is exhibition again, games and lesson plan. This multi-user school-based interactive timeline is an excellent example of integration of collections and interpretative and educational material. That project had been developed with school board in Montreal, where all the students get their own computer, so it was possible to, in group, to develop timelines, and they can share it all together. Okay, the virtual historian is a project that had been developed with the Faculty of Education of the University of Ottawa. Uses a collaborative public sharing and outreach tool to create and deliver interactive and digital lesson plan with media libraries. Public contribution. So many museums are all for user participation, but some still question how they can contribute to collections, documentation, and interpretation. Should museums build their own user contribution platforms or stick only with social media? So public contribution, this virtual exhibition from Musée de la Civilisation in Quebec City called Sharing a Meal, so here is the English title, invites people to document and share their food traditions with the online digital database and exhibit. So public contribution, so that project had been developed by the Virtual Museum of Canada lab. So it was a project, an experiment. It was a collaborative effort between the museums and the national capital and other institutions. It acted as a portal for interaction on YouTube and Flickr. So the people, everybody was also, it was possible for everybody to post their own object and telling why it's important for them, etc. So it was a collaborative public contribution. Again, here, my card feature that dates back to the mid-2000, but it was ahead of its time, with very rich user personalization and participation feature, including avatar. Their system has a deep integration into the digital collection, but also the educational program. Multi-partner collaboration. Technology has enabled repatriation initiative through digital collection. How can museum database allow documentation of digital collection for multiple and remote partners? So that project, it's a very old project. In fact, it's one of the first virtual exhibition of the Virtual Museum of Canada. So it was a huge project. So this virtual exhibit is one of the first virtual exhibition, as I just said, of the Virtual Museum of Canada, while dating back to the mid-90s. So this project already illustrated the evolving need of bringing together digital collection and content for multiple museum and partners. So many of those examples show you, it's feasible today to have all the dissemination integrated all together using all those different tools and perspective. So another multi-partner collaboration project, this digital collection database, have created the possibility for digital repatriation for the Innu. Particularly interesting for First Nation because the older native people are very old, and the young leave this region, Labrador and North Quebec, and they leave for Montreal or they want to live downtown. So Patrimoine Canada, so Canadian Heritage through the Virtual Museum of Canada decided to record all that heritage, the intangible heritage, and develop that project with this community, Tipechumuna community. Multi-partner collaboration. So the GRASAT project, knowledge building, an initiative of Ruth Phillips at Carleton University, is an ideal also collaboration platform allowing museums, researchers, university and museums and the community membership to create and manage digital collection and project, including language models. So it's a scientific platform. So with the arrival of the smartphone and tablets, a dilemma has emerged for museum. Should they invest in exhibit multimedia, web apps, native apps, etc.? Can museum afford to support all of those platforms? Is it relevant? Is it even an option in the actual economical context? So this exhibit in the new Jean Chrétien Museum here in Quebec, province of Quebec, demonstrate the approach of using a centralized web-based digital collection database to create interactive touch screen kiosk experiences in the physical exhibit. These native apps that have been launched by the city of Quebec 2 months ago allows visitors to discover the material and immaterial heritage of the city. It is also connected to a central digital web-based collection database, and it can just grow. They want to do all the city. Now there is two old section, I would say. They want to do all the city. So it's not only a dissemination tool, but it is a dissemination tool, but also it's done. It's also an encyclopedia of the city at the same time. Finally, a museum can expand their reach outside, stretching as far as the collection will allow it by georeferencing relevant content and creating tours and related themes and resources. So that's the same application here. The digital museum, so I'm still believing in that museum experience pre, during, and post. So it can be formulated in different way and in the time and space, for sure. And the museum space, but we have inside the walls, at home and other institutions. I think museums now have reached that goal to reach people at home and also at school, etc. But on the street, and there is a lot to do to make that relation, not only to live and experience on the street, but to make that link between what's going on the street culturally, and also how we can bring, with partnership, people from the street inside the museum and have a complementary or a different experience, more focus on the object. Thank you very much.
So we are going to talk about placemaking today, and just to give a little bit of background, I come from the academic world. My background is interdisciplinary. It brings together communications, art history, museum studies. I really believe that because digital technology affects nearly every aspect of our society and nearly every aspect of museums, we need to have a broad approach in looking at digital technology and where it is today. So this notion of placemaking, we're going to really delve a little bit into today. And some of the questions are, what are the new places that museums are occupying in the digital age? How do museums act with their visitors in these new places? How do these new places connect with the old places? What are the new places that audiences are occupying and what are they doing there? And how do museums make place? And is there a home base or a hub? So these are some of the writings and theories that have influenced my work. And as I said, it is interdisciplinary. And there's a lot about this notion of place and practice and locality and space and communities and the public sphere. So placemaking is a very hot topic. What is placemaking? Placemaking is generally considered a community grassroots effort, as with, for example, the Project for Public Spaces in the United States that considers the sociocultural implications of placemaking. Art Place America is an intermediary acting between national funders and the communities themselves. They have awarded over $42 million in 79 US communities, and they support creative placemaking, which is this notion of placing artists and art at the center of planning, execution, and activity that transforms community. So placemaking in the analog age was not a grassroots effort, but rather one imposed from above for the purposes of uniting the community, demonstrating power, imposing order on the natural world, and understanding mankind's place within the universe. For example, Central Park, which was the first landscape public park in the US, when the state legislature allotted 700 acres in 1853. It was originally only for the elite, and we know this because over half of the visitors in the first few years came by carriage, and they had laws banning picnics so that immigrants from Italy and Poland and Ireland wouldn't come. Of course, we know that changed over the years, but slowly. So there are two ways in which museums have been involved in placemaking. One is as civic institutions, used by civic leaders to forge a sense of place, much like libraries, universities, parks, gardens. The Art Institute of Chicago, for example, in the aftermath of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, there was a deep urgency to rebuild the city. And so 20 years later, the Institute and the World's Columbian Exposition agreed to jointly have funds to create a new building on the lakefront. And that was the birth of the Chicago Art Museum as we know it today. The sociologist Tony Bennett writes about early museums in Europe in the 18th and 19th century that were, quote, a coalescence of the display of power to the populace and its display within the ruling class. The industrial era brought the working class into cities. And so museums became the ideal vehicle for teaching socially acceptable manners, values, dress, and behavior. Things were not much different in 19th century America, where there were still sharp class differences, but instead of royalty, we had affluent civic leaders and philanthropists such as the Rockefellers, the Whitneys, J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie. So the second way that museums are involved in placemaking is when museums create their own place. For example, the Getty Center. When it opened in 1997, it was much criticized for choosing its location at the top of a hill in the wealthy, secluded neighborhood of Brentwood in Los Angeles. It was ridiculed at first for the Disneylandish tram that brought visitors from the underground parking up to the top. And it was criticized by neighbors for bringing millions of people to their quiet neighborhood and developing the beautiful hillside. Today, it has become an architectural symbol for the city of Los Angeles, seen from far away, and it's the city's most popular cultural attraction, as much for its art as for the view and fabulous gardens. So there are two main reasons why place has receded for the modern museum. One is due to technology, and two is due to the primacy of experience. Both are related, as new digital technologies allow for new kinds of experiences, a continuous cycle of dependence. The museum experience, written by Falk and Dierking in 1992, signaled the beginning of this phenomenon. Experiences subjugate place because they can be taken away by the visitor, stored in memory, and often recalled through various strategies, analog and digital, that may no longer relate to the original place-based experience. In her book on public art, philosophy professor Hilda Hein in 2006 coined the term the experiential museum, arguing that the primacy of experiences in the mid-20th century served to displace the museum's collection. As museums became about experience, they became less connected to place. Objects became vehicles for the delivery of experience rather than ends upon themselves. So what I am proposing is that place is different in the digital age. Before we talk about whether place has disappeared or reappeared, let's talk about how it is different today. Place no longer implies locality. We have synchronous digital communications technologies, such as Skype, chat, web conferencing, telepresence video conferencing, where place becomes that indeterminate point of interest within a global network of users. Place no longer implies permanence. We know from cultural theorists that write about migration of classes, races, and ethnicities from the periphery to the center, and that fluctuating nature of that very new center. It is different because it is a space of flows, as Castell says. It is a chronotype, as Bakhtin calls it. It is a practice place, as de Certeau calls it. Rhythms, Lefebvre calls it. Locality, Eric Gordon and de Souza and Silva. It is an event, as Edward Casey says. And Clifford says it is an itinerary, a series of encounters and translations. Edward Casey describes how the reappearance of place requires a distinctly different form, one that is heterogeneous and open precisely in places. So I'm particularly fond of etymology, having lived in Greece for a long time. And I just want to go through topos being place and this notion of atopia, which is out of place and improper. And it's interesting because this notion of atopia appears in the New Testament 4 times. And utopia, which is a sense of being nowhere and not a place, which reminds me of Marita Sturken and her notion of non-places, which she got from Marc Aguet in 1995. And Sturken writes that if modernity was characterized by a separation of place and space, in postmodernity there is an emphasis on the proliferation of non-spaces, such as airports, freeways, bank machines. Paul Virilio, the French cultural theorist, despite his pessimistic view about technology, proposes that reality exists in a virtual world where technology allows for teletopia, the paradox of being everywhere at the same time while being nowhere at all. So let's take a case of the Guggenheim, what I'm calling In Search of a Place. We have on the left side the main buildings of the Guggenheim, the satellites, some realized, some not, physical places, we might say. And then we have on the right 2 very notable programs, recent programs of the Guggenheim. We have the most recent of the Guggenheim UBS MAP Global Art Initiative in 2012, which fosters cross-cultural interaction between artists, curators, and audiences, focusing on 3 regions: South and Southeast Asia, Latin America, Middle East, and North Africa. Curatorial residencies, international touring exhibitions, educational programming, and acquisitions for the Guggenheim's permanent collection. And then we have the BMW Guggenheim Lab, which started in 2011, a mobile lab about urban life that traveled to New York, Berlin, and Mumbai. Part think tank, part community center, public gathering space. So what I'm proposing is not that the Guggenheim has abandoned its signature building or its continuing interest in satellite museums around the world, but I believe that its sense of finding its place within the world is now more experientially based than physical. So we have this notion of the distributed museum, which is an idea that came out of research that I conducted together with Professor Ann Balsamo, who was at the University of Southern California and is now Dean of the School of Media Studies at the New School for Public Engagement. And this notion of the distributed museum describes how museums are moving along new spaces that are part of contemporary network learning environments. The distributed museum, as we propose, exists over the conceptual divides between physical and virtual, fixed and mobile. Today, the mobile museum consists of satellite museum spaces around the city or the globe, museum programs conducted off-site, special vehicles that provide multimedia learning experiences based on museum collections that travel around. So we contend that the mobile museum has morphed into the distributed museum. So some examples of this notion about being distributed. Of course, we have the movable museum program at the American Museum of Natural History, the old mobile museum. Actually, the museum's program started in 1903 when they had their school service, which would deliver natural history objects to schools at no cost around town. We have Brooklyn Museum's concept about community, which is a very distributed concept of community. And we have the Craft and Folk Art Museum in Los Angeles, and I love this program. It's called Folk Art Everywhere. And they actually take pieces from their collection and put it in vitrines in the most unsuspecting places. More examples of the distributed museum. Given the popularity of the Detroit Institute of Art's Inside Out installation throughout Metro Detroit, other museums have launched similar projects. The National Gallery transformed London's West End into an outdoor gallery in 2007 with the Grand Tour, and 3 museums launched their own version in 2012. The Walters Art Museum, the Taft Museum of Art in Cincinnati, and the Delaware Art Museum, with artists everywhere. Tate Art Maps, mobile and web application in 2012, and the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco at SFO Airport Museum. So how does this new global community of virtual visitors relate to the local community of physical visitors? Is the community being built and maintained from the ground up, as in the meetmetup.com? or from above, as in MoMA online courses on Facebook? And does it matter? If museums are themselves communities or networks, how do they relate to their external communities and networks on the local, national, and global levels? While at the same time expanding the notion of a museum community, digital technology has allowed museums to more efficiently serve many of their different communities that they have already classified: teachers, scholars, teens, artists. One example of this data visualization that maps a museum's global community, two examples actually, very good examples, is the Met Around the World and the Tate, Tate art maps and the Louvre. And these are interactive on their websites, noting where their collections are, where their exhibitions are, where their partners are. Social media, going to the places where your audience is, connecting your online and physical places. Geotagging photos. Virtual worlds. Again, place no longer implies physicality. Two wonderful examples. The Exploratorium had a live webcast of the transit of Venus streamed into Second Life in 2012. Especially if we consider internet terminology such as landing on a website, we understand this integration between the physical and the virtual. Mobile technologies, mobile websites. The Art Institute of Chicago tours, the first art museum in the world to offer an indoor GPS app for iPhone and Android. Although mobile communication still requires spatial contextualization, physicality provides an important cognitive grounding for communication. Where are you is always the common question when we call. So I'm proposing the reappearance of place in the digital age. No, place is not gone. It has not disappeared, it has reappeared. And it has reappeared in a new form, and we've seen some of those new forms. Part of it is experience. Experience as a flow, experience as a journey. Place remains a critical component in the digital age in the same way that the physical object remains critical to art museums, despite the ubiquity of their digital images. Katie Hafner in Technological Vision says people still want a sense of place, a sense of belonging in a physical way. That sense is a feeling. Museums are beginning to appreciate the interconnectedness and the reciprocity of the net that thrives on processes and relations, much like the semantic web. However, we are still grounded in the physical and the local. These experiences are grounded in the physical and the local. But we need to ask, is our physical building a hub? Is our website an online hub? Do we need a hub within our distributed networks? Or merely a means to visualize and support all of these connections that we have today? How do we get back into place? Edward Casey says that it's by our own lived body, thus the increase in interactive experiences that we're seeing in museums. So I propose that the reemergence of place in the digital age permits a symbiotic relationship with experience rather than a contradictory one. The proposal of a place experience allows for fluid movement through space and time, as well as through society and community in general. So one shameless plug as I end. This research was based on, this talk was based on research that I did for a number of years. And the research has just been published by Altamira Press, and the book is going to come out in a matter of weeks. So I have flyers down here with discounts by the publisher. You can order online. And thank you very much.